Okay.
Readable.
Yeah. Do we want to put her for Brazos? So this is the technical definition of deconstruction, but it's not as fun as my word because with this one it's just not that much fun. If you click the arrow, it'll go to the actual screen.
Oh, there we go.
It's a philosophical and critical movement starting in the 1960s and especially applied to the study of literature that questions all traditional assumptions about the ability of language to represent reality and emphasizes that a text has no stable reference or identification because words essentially only refer to other words, and therefore a reader must approach a text by eliminating any metaphysical or ethnocentric assumptions through an active role of defining meaning, sometimes by a reliance on a new word construction, etymology, puns, and other wordplay. Raise your hand if you understood that. So she's the only one I didn't even understand the first time I read it. So this is what it means. I'm going to put it in other words.
10 words.
If I have a word, it cannot mean by itself, it can't mean anything. If I said, David, you look like a flibbershibble. Who understood what I meant?
Ugly.
Was it an insult? Was it a compliment? Who wouldn't know? No one would know because it has no definition. It doesn't have any background. It doesn't have anything to it. It doesn't have anything attached to it. So with a word, you have to have something with it, or else it isn't able to have any meaning.
I know you hear Wrecking Ball in the background. We put that in because Austin really wanted to fit that in to our song.
But I couldn't.
We couldn't come up with a transition. And it's also kind of symbolic of deconstruction because a wrecking ball, it's like you're taking apart the meaning of the word.
So in the book, how do you find this fantastic thing in the book? So we found 3 things. First, we're going to start off with the scene where Huck and Finn have just found each other again
Huck
after
and Tom. You said Huck and Finn.
Oh,
Or Huck and Jim. Huck and Jim.
Sorry, Huck and Jim. They just reunited after being separated in the fog, and Huck was playing the trick that nothing had ever happened, and then when Jim realizes that Huck was playing the joke, he says this all. And what we were focusing mainly on was how he used the word trash. And so he references, in the yellow he says, and all you was thinking about was how you could make a fool of old Jim with a lie. That truck is trash, and trash is what people is that puts dirt on the head, and friends make them ashamed. And so what he's doing there is he's changing the meaning of trash from stuff that's just on the boat itself to being a person who's being mean to a friend. He's changing the meaning of the word from one thing to another, and that's sort of how deconstruction works in this sense.
Wait, could you repeat that? Like, how did he change trash? Like, how did he make it?
He changed it from meaning just a bunch of rubbish to being someone who is being mean to a friend.
A characteristic of a person.
Right.
They changed it from the physical noun that is trash, okay, which is a tangible item, okay, but then you take the word trash in this relation, and I hope you don't mind me stepping in and helping,
No,
it's
it's
okay. But it's more intangible. It's more of a descriptor quality, and it's narrowing in on his characteristic, who he is. And it's okay that I help. That doesn't reflect on the
Okay.
grade, okay?
Right. All right.
So the next example of deconstruction in the book was with the Duke and the King, and here is an excerpt of the scene in which the Duke and the King were in. And so the titles of these men, being Duke and King, would imply to most people that they've amassed great wealth and power, when that's really far from the truth. That's not who they are at all. If we were to only see those words, Duke and King, without having a grasp of who they were or really knowing the characters, we would assume they were two wealthy, honest, and noble people, and that's simply not who they are. And when we make these kind of assumptions, we're believing exactly what Twain doesn't want us to believe, and subverting the real meaning of the text, which kind of goes back to deconstruction. it's turning really a biting expose of human culture and human dishonesty into just a completely normal piece of literature that's not really achieving what it's supposed to be doing.
Anything to add? What? You good?
No. Just sort of something to add in this excerpt. He's also saying, because as a Duke and a King, you sort of think of them as being really well dressed and clean and everything, but in here he's making them old.
He's highlighting the fact that they're ragged and old.
And they're wearing
And
torn up
callous.
clothes, and they're dirty and everything. And so it sort of
Goes against what you would expect.
right.
Okay, so we all know this is how Jim is described. But I think when we're talking about deconstruction, we have to talk about the background of a word. But then you have to think, okay, well, deconstruction takes out any meaning or background of a word. So when you have this word and it's presented with deconstruction, it means literally nothing. It is just a certain amount of letters stuck on a page, written, or said. It's a word said. There's nothing with it. It can't be an insult if there is no meaning. If I said, Sarah, your sweatshirt's gray. Wow, that is such an insult. But it's not, though, because the meaning is she's wearing a sweatshirt and it's gray. There's no insult there. And so when you have the N-word in this book, and you have deconstruction and you apply it, because there's no meaning, there is nothing wrong with the word. But then you get to, well, if that's true, then why is it there? It's there because there is background to it. There is something there to it. But what deconstruction literary theory is asking us to do is to step beyond that, is to step beyond the background, to step beyond the meaning, and say, what does this word, how much power does it have? Does it have power over me? Does it have power over Jim? Because it has no power over Jim becoming friends with Huck. That didn't change the story. It should have, because back in those days, if he would have ran off with Huck, you might as well say, I might as well die now. But deconstruction, with that, says he's a person who is protecting someone he cares about. He is Jim. That word in front of it has no power now. And if you let deconstruction help you, there's no word out there that can have power over anything. Words have no power. And that's why I think deconstruction is one of the best literary themes.
Just to add to that, the N-word is only used in reference to Jim. It's not in reference to slavery or the inferiority of black people. If you notice, it just says N-word Jim. It never says that N-word or he is such an N-word. It says that N-word Jim. And so when you're using it only to reference him, you're not implying that it has any sort of use or meaning in any other context. It was really more a part of his name as opposed to a title or some sort of discriminatory theme.
Word. And that's the end.
Wow.
So we hope you like the song.
Okay, now I'm
the present,
gonna ask you a couple questions.
and the bibliography.
Okay.
Okay.
I like your statement. Words have no power. I like that. Where does and it's kind of a simple question, but where does the word get the power?
Well, I think you have to think about how, even though the literary theme of deconstruction, it asks us to take out the meaning and out of the definition. But even if we do look at it that way, there still is background to it. You can't, I could make up a new word and there would be no definition to it. But just having history of something there is definition to it.
Well, and I think where I'm. Did you want to say something?
Well, I was going to say, for example, if I was a therapist and I was talking to you and you were doing word associations, if I said the N word to you, the first things you would probably associate with that word would be slavery, black people, uneducated, inferiority,
Well, you're making
white
an
supremacy.
assumption. Did you even make an assumption about me? Okay.
Well, I mean, just in general, that's like
I'm kidding.
kind of the history of the word. But you wouldn't think Jim. If I said N word, you wouldn't say, "Oh, Jim." That's not what you would think. But that's how it's used in this book. It's used only in association with his name.
Well, and I think where I'm going to take your idea and I'm going to take it one step further, okay? And that is when you look at deconstruction, you need to be sure and realize that when he talks about words have no power, and I'm going to go back again to what was in your PowerPoint, history is what gives words power, okay? It's all about the history, and that's why a lot of the reasons people say, why do we study history? Well, this is exactly why. And when you start reading literature and you start looking at words within context and ideas, it all has to do with the history of that word. Okay? And with it, you bring history, but it's the part you have to be careful of is the preconceived ideas. That preconceived notion that this word means this because of my personal history with this word. And deconstruction is basically asking you to walk away without these preconceived notions and to look at the book in an interpretive fashion so that you can gain new meaning from the literature based on unbiased, undefined stereotypes. Make sense? Good job. I like your song.
Thank you.
Does someone take